Arrangement is sealed not in words, but in wounds, signed not by ink, but by the subtle blood of psychic overextension. And it is this contract, more than any external threat, that depletes the empathic soul and feeds the very suffering they hope to extinguish. Think of how the child first discovers feeling, not as a choice, but as survival. Perhaps there was chaos in the home, perhaps unspoken tension, perhaps a parent drowning in unprocessed grief. The sensitive child stretches their antennae, reading whether the adult refuses to name, adjusting behavior, breathing in the atmosphere so another might breathe out. In that moment, the contract is drafted. If I carry what you cannot, you will not break. The child does not know that such rescue is too costly. They only know that collapse would be worse. Years later, the empath stands among friends, lovers, strangers, living the same vow. They call it kindness. They call it ministry. Jung would call it identification with the rejected shadow of the other, a merger that slowly erases the empath's own borders until they are little more than a canvas for alien projections. I have watched empaths glow like lanterns in dark rooms, and I have watched how moths of unowned anguish inevitably swarm their light. People sense them, even unconsciously. Here is the one who will cradle my rage, my grief, my unfinished nightmare, and the empath, compelled by an ancient promise, allows it. They open the gates of their nervous system, flooding themselves with feeling, and momentarily the room calms. They confuse that calm with healing, but it is merely displacement. The pain has not vanished, it has migrated. Such migration pleases the group, so the empath is praised. Praise becomes a drug, fulfilling the unspoken half of the contract. If I hurt for you, you will keep me. Yet below that applause, the unconscious mutters a darker clause. One day, the weight you carry will crush you, and those you saved may not even notice. The psyche, however, is not cruel. It is instructive. It begins to send dreams, the empath throttled by vines, the empath drowning in a sea of nameless faces, the empath nursing a serpent that grows each night. These images are not punishment, they are negotiations. The unconscious is saying, renounce the contract or perish by it. But most do not hear. They seek more light meditation, prayer, service each practice noble until it becomes avoidance. Light that denies darkness becomes blinding, and the empath, ironically, goes blind to their own depletion. I once treated a nurse who felt physical pain whenever a patient cried. She called it a gift from God. I asked her to trace the line of that gift back to childhood. She spoke of a mother bedridden by depression, a father gone, a house ringing with silence. At 5 years old, she learned that if she mirrored her mother's sorrow, her mother would whisper, "You understand me." That whisper was the wage for carrying despair twice her size. Decades later, the hospital ward replaced a childhood bedroom, but the economy remained unchanged. Her body, breaking under decades of transferred sorrow, betrayed the false holiness of her contract. When I suggested that her tears were sometimes misdirected rage, she recoiled as if I had cursed a saint. Rage, she insisted, belonged to others. She was made for care. Yet, it was unclaimed rage that had made her light so irresistible to the dark. Jung taught that whatever we refuse to make conscious appears outside as fate. For the empath, unowned aggression, unmet need, unlived selfishness all accumulate in the unconscious, forming a magnetic pole that draws predatory or endlessly injured personalities. The empath calls this magnetism compassion, but shadow calls it compensation. Rescue becomes a way to harvest crumbs of worthiness, and the wider the smile, the deeper the hunger. When at last exhaustion forces withdrawal, guilt attacks like a hound. If you stop carrying them, they will suffer. Thus the contract renews itself through shame. The empath believes the shame is moral, but truly it is archetypal, an inner God demanding sacrifice. How then to break the pact? Not by dimming the light, but by naming the cost of shining. First, obedience to feeling must be replaced by dialogue with feeling. The empath senses a wave of sorrow approaching before opening the gates. They speak to it. Whose sorrow are you? What task do you bring me? Do you belong within my skin, or are you seeking witness only? To ask such questions is to step out of enchantment. Second, the empath must retrieve the power projected onto the other. If they are perpetually rescuing victims, they must find their own victim within and rescue that one first. If they fear becoming the abuser, they must meet the abuser archetype in dreams, confronting its face rather than outsourcing it to difficult partners. Only then does the psyche recognize the empath as a whole being rather than a feeding ground. You may feel unease as I speak, perhaps the contract stirs, warning that to listen further is betrayal. Let it stir, it is proof of its existence. The ego will say, but if I stop feeling for them, I will become selfish. That is the spell. Reality is subtler. When the empath withdraws consent to psychic trespass, true compassion-rooted, bounded, sustainable finally becomes possible. The empaths can still tend the suffering, but they no longer swallow it. They mirror it back with clarity, inviting the sufferer to own their pain. Some will, many will not. The empaths must accept this limit. Otherwise, they continue the cycle. Pain displaced today will return tomorrow in a different face, each time heavier. There is a final revelation, and it is hardest of all. The dark contract is not merely personal, it is ancestral. Many empaths descend from lineages where silence and service were survival. Their nervous systems are archives of generational bargains. We will be the sensitive ones if the tribe may live. To break the contract is to confront not only personal guilt, but tribal loyalty. Dreams may show ancestors weeping or chastising. These are symbols of internalized legacy. The empath must answer, I honor your suffering, but I will not replicate it. Only then does the ancestral shadow loosen its grip, and the empath's light begins to shine free of debt. Feel these words settling into you. If they provoke resistance, breathe slower. That resistance is the contract tightening. If they spark relief, guard the flame, for relief quickly invites new responsibility. We are only at the first passage of this exploration. The night is long and the unconscious patient. Yet, if you stay, if you dare to gaze at the hidden claws beneath your luminous kindness, something previously impossible will occur. Your light will cease to hunger for darkness and will instead illuminate darkness into light. When we speak of the empath's shadow, we are not describing a flaw in character, but a wound in orientation. The pain lies not in feeling too much, but in believing that one must. The empath often confuses permeability with virtue, believing that to let everything in is holy, that to carry pain without complaint is love, and that to deny themselves is the highest form of spiritual nobility. But this is the deception that shadow delights in, and it is a deception born of a deeper forgetting, the forgetting that boundaries are sacred, that to allow the self to vanish in the other is not transcendence but trauma reenacted. And so the empath, radiant in outer behavior, becomes haunted by inner depletion. They may appear calm, even saintly in the face of suffering, yet they wake at night gripped by unnameable anxiety, loneliness, or dread. They dream of being chased, drained, consumed. They walk through the world like wells full, open, inviting, but unaware of the sediment building at the bottom. Every pain they absorb that is not metabolized adds to this sediment. The smile remains, but the water grows bitter. Some try to cleanse this sediment through spiritual bypass. They turn to purity rituals, excessive forgiveness, chronic positivity, or endless helping. But none of this reaches the wound, because the wound is not spiritual, it is archetypal. It is the child in the psyche who still believes that to be good. And if the answer is no, the empath must put it down without apology, without explanation, without guilt. And when they do, something miraculous happens. Their light changes. It no longer seduces the wounded to outsource their pain. It invites the wounded to face it. Their presence no longer whispers, I will carry you. It proclaims, I will stand with you, but you must walk. That is real power. That is true empathy. And yes, some will leave. Some who once fed on your light will recoil from your fire. Let them. That is part of the purification. Your light was never meant to be food. It was meant to be a beacon. This is the path ahead. It is not easy, but it is sacred. And I will walk beside you through every shadow chamber until your forgotten rooms echo with your own name spoken not as sacrifice, but as sovereignty. Feel the hush that settles when an oath is questioned. In that hush, the shadow listens, wondering whether you will finally notice its presence. You who call yourself empath, do you feel the tremor in your chest just now? That is the contract pulsing, uncertain whether it still owns you. Stay with that tremor. Do not soothe it away. Let it speak, because beneath its quiver is the voice you have not allowed to form syllables, the voice that says, I am tired of being made holy by disappearing. There is a dream I have encountered in many guises. A traveler enters a candlelit chapel. At the altar stands a gleaming chalice, written on its rim, drink, and they shall be healed. But each sip drains the traveler's own blood into the cup until, finally, the chalice brims while the dreamer's body turns translucent. They awaken gasping, convinced they have touched sacrilege. They have naught against God, but against self. For what divinity would demand your extinction so that another might live? Only the false god of the ancient contract. To dissolve that idol, you must commit a sacred heresy. You must place your own soul on the altar and refuse to sacrifice it. This act will feel like blasphemy the first time. You will hear the inner critic cry, selfish! You will hear the ghost voices of family say, who do you think you are? You may even feel nauseous bodies protest as the psychic musculature that has held the contract in place begins to loosen. Breathe. Nausea is not a verdict. It is detoxification. Let us speak of anger, for it is the fire that forges new agreements. Empaths fear anger the way moths fear open flame, and for similar reason they have been burned before. Perhaps anger in childhood arrived as violence, unpredictability, humiliation. To survive, the nervous system decided we will never emit such heat, so the furnace was sealed. But a sealed furnace does not become safe, it becomes pressurized. It hisses through cracks, passive aggression, migraines, silent despair. The contract whispers, better to hurt yourself in secret than risk hurting another. That whisper is a lie. Anger, when faced, is not violence. It is boundary in motion. It is the psyche declaring, I exist, and this line matters. Begin small. The next time you feel the subtle intrusion, the text that demands instant soothing, the friend who monologues pain while ignoring yours, the family pattern that crowns you eternal counselor, pause. Sense the ember of irritation flicker in your gut. Instead of dousing it with premature empathy, ask it, what do you wish me to protect? You may hear nothing at first. The ember has been silenced too long. But if you stay, a word will surface. Time, rest, dignity, space. Then, in plain language, speak that need. A simple sentence. I hear this is hard. I can stay with you for 10 minutes, then I have to tend to myself. You will shake. That is normal. Each tremor is an iron link of the old chains snapping. Night will test you. The contract is cunning. It pipes guilt into dreams. You may dream of the one you refuse turning into a child abandoned on a doorstep, or of disaster striking because you were not there to prevent them. Do not interpret these dreams literally. They are the contract's propaganda. Counter them by entering the dream in active imagination. Walk to the doorstep. Lift the child. Look into its eyes. You will often find they are your own eyes, begging you to rescue yourself. Take the child inside. Give it bread. Promise it will not have to bargain its aliveness for love ever again. This inner reparenting is not fantasy. It is neurosurgery performed in symbol. Another common dream follows when the empath begins reclaiming power. They see themselves wearing bright clothing, Gold, emerald that embarrasses them. Crowds stare. The dreamer tries to hide. Symbolically, these garments are the life force and charisma long offered to others. The psyche is dressing you in your rightful color. Your discomfort is the residue of humility distorted into self-erasure. Practice wearing color in waking life, literally, metaphorically. Speak a desire aloud at lunch. Take up an entire seat on the train. Let your laughter be uncensored for a whole minute. These are micro-rituals, but ritual is how archetype becomes flesh. Now we come to the most clandestine clause of the contract. The empath's secret belief that if they become radiant in their own right, they will outshine the people they love and thus be exiled. This dread is typically pre-verbal, rooted in early moments where the caretaker's fragility made the child dim their joy. Undoing it requires witnessing the original scene not to blame, but to unfreeze. In imaginal work, return to that room where your excitement was met with parental collapse or envy. See the child version of you swallow sparkle like poison. Step in now as the adult self. Place a hand on their back and tell them, your light does not harm, withholding it does. Invite the caretaker's images to watch as you and the child dance. Sing, radiate. The dream may resist. Try again tomorrow. Persistence rewrites psychic memory. We must address love, because the empath often equates love with labor. They sweat affection. But real intimacy cannot bloom in the soil of exhaustion. It roots in mutual revelation. Present your full self the boundaries, the anger, the silly delight, the sexual hunger, the flawed yearning. Some companions will recoil. Let them go. Contracts seek co-signers. When you shred yours, those invested in its benefits will depart. This is grief, yes, but also pruning. Space is cleared for relationships where your energy circulates rather than bleeds. Here arises a paradox. The healthier the empath's boundary, the stronger their true intuitive capacity grows. Once they no longer mistake projection for perception, they can sense deeper layers of reality without drowning. I have seen empaths post-contract develop art, healing modalities, leadership abilities that astonished them. The psyche had always stored these potentials in the sealed rooms. Freed, they stream into daylight. Yet humility remains essential. Power reclaimed can swing into inflation. I have healed, therefore I can heal all. Watch for the savior archetype slipping on new shoes. The litmus test is reciprocity. Does the interaction nourish both, or does it tilt inevitable toward your depletion? If the latter, you have slipped into old vows wearing new vocabulary. Stop, breathe, renegotiate. Ancestral echoes may resurface here. You break the contract for yourself, but also for those before you who could not. Dream figures of grandmothers, great-grandfathers, cultural ancestors may appear sometimes grateful, sometimes stern. Offer them acknowledgement. I honor what you endured. I choose differently, and in doing so, I free your story to rest. Pour water on the earth as libation. Light a candle, write a letter, and burn it. Ritual satisfies the archetypal level more than any number of affirmations. Finally, the world will test the durability of your new stance. Crises will arise, friends, in chaos, headlines soaked in suffering. You will feel the old pull. Open the gates, absorb it all. Pause. Place one hand on your belly, one on your heart. Ask, what action is mine? What grief is the world's? And where is the line? Then act only from the portion truly yours. This is not indifference, it is spiritual maturity. The collective heals faster